Right, I guess with that we'll get started. Konstantin, take it away.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming on such a nice day. And here's my son, Max, and we did that project together. It was kind of my attempt to show him how cool the dad is. Did it work? There we go. So he did a little bit of programming as well under my guidance, but he mostly was doing the soldering, the hard part. So, and it's actually, it was very, very cool. So we bought the new house and kind of in a rush decided what to do, and decided to do the Christmas lights. But just the Christmas lights, everybody's doing them, so I decided, why not we try something fancy? We saw the YouTube fancy videos, and why not? So I looked at different things and settled down on Arduino because it's open source, has lots of software, lots of guides, and how to wire this, how to wire that, and was using a little bit of my past life knowledge of the radio techniques and those electrical circuits. We decided to put things together, and you can see it's all here. It's not very fancy, just some wooden boards and receptacles. So by no means it's a demonstration of all the capabilities of Arduino, or it's not a showcase how our Arduino programming skills great. No, it's just a kind of a testament how quickly nowadays we can put together something that will control the physical world or connect the physical world to the virtual world we usually live in. So what we did is, an Arduino board and a Java program to control that. It's possible to write very sophisticated Arduino programs, but their IDE is just nowhere near even Eclipse. When I tried to program in that, oh my God, it was flashbacks in, I don't know, 90-something, 80-something, when there is no IntelliSense, nothing. I just have to read the documentation, copy the function name, and paste it in IDE. So I try to keep that program in Arduino part as small as possible. So we put all the intelligence in Java. And one of the challenges in Java was to find the right native driver to go and communicate through the USB device. But with the help from Arduino forums, it was as easy as copying the right shared library in a current directory, and it worked. So the Java application.
Konstantin?
Yeah.
The Arduino Uno on the Mac, you don't even need a driver now. It's just available. I think they changed the hardware so it was able to act as a known device, just for information.
So can you say that again?
Yeah, there's a version of the Arduino board called the Arduino Uno, and they changed the USB, the little circuit, the part of the circuit board that communicates with USB, and it's a known device to the Mac. So the newer Arduino Uno board doesn't need a driver on the Mac.
Who knows? As I said, it's good to know. I just got the biggest Arduino board I could get, Arduino Mega, so I could use a lot of circuits to control the different channels. So it has Arduino Uno, I think it has 8 channels. Mega has 14 channels and even more. But it turns out that they are silent about channel 1 that actually caused a lot of grief, because everything worked, but when we plugged the device to the solid-state relays, everything stopped working. And turns out that channel 1 is also shares the wire with the TX in the serial port, one of the Arduino serial ports. So it couldn't communicate with the Java program anymore once you plug this in. It's a weird thing to trace. So here was a little Java application where I tried to teach some concepts to my son about threads. You know, those keyboard listener, effects player, MP3 player, serial communication, just different threads. Every thread minds its own business. And they all work to create something I hope will work here as well. So this is the mega board, and see, this is the TX, it says right on port 1. Well, there is an init in an Arduino that says, okay, I want this pin to be output, or I want this pin to be input. I want that pin to be a digital or analog input or output. So I thought it's intelligent enough to understand when I said, this is the output, it will disable something. Nah. So this is the board. USB device, external power, which is optional, and lots of pins. So those are analog ins, and those are input outputs. It's programmatically you can assign what this pin does. I don't know what those guys are doing. They say digital, but I didn't find the commands to control them. Probably more channels.
Is there a add-on or a daughter board to do Ethernet?
Yes, there is actually, it's very cool. You see those connectors? They have lots of, they call them shields. So basically you put additional boards and stack them up. They have wireless, Ethernet, USB extenders, various sensors. If you could imagine, they probably have it. You know, some folks do those arcade games. You know, the big pinball machines. So I was impressed actually the capabilities of that hardware and how easy is it to control it. It's awesome. So little challenge was how to control the high voltage circuits. And there were different opinions in all those forums. So I scratched my head and tried to remember everything I learned. And finally there's lots of, well, the choice was obvious, solid state relays. But there are so many different kinds of relays. And when they put little explanations and documentation, they assume you know how to use them.
That's not fair.
Well, it's sometimes fair assumption. But the trick is, you look at the list of the characteristics and all the relays, and it was at first hard to figure out if this relay requires external resistor or not. Basically, we figured that out, and little guys doesn't require anything. And the trick is, when you look at the solid state relay, if as an input it has a definite number like 5 volts, it requires external circuitry. If it says 3 to 32 or something like that as a range, it requires nothing. You can plug it directly to Arduino board and it will work. And the only mistake I did is not to check the leakage current. And you can see this guy, it's a LED Christmas lights. It's kind of a semi-lit. That's because solid state relays, they still let little current to pass. And it's not enough to lit up the incandescents, but LEDs, are fine. So if you'll do that, check that the solid state relays have very, very, very little leakage current, or you don't use LEDs. So,
Konstantin?
yeah.
The last time I looked at solid state relays, which admittedly was like 10 or 15 years ago, they were kind of expensive, but I have no idea what they are today. How much would they cost?
$2 a piece.
Yeah, okay.
$2 or $5 a piece. I don't remember.
Okay.
They were-
And then the other thing I'd mention is that Arduino has, I think, a very small resistor on each pin to help like minimize the risk of your damaging it. So it has a little bit of resistance on each pin anyway.
Yeah, it's actually has the circuit like this. So yeah, so that's a list of solid state relays. You see those guys, they can be directly plugged, but this guy cannot. It says you have to use external. Oh, I don't have that circuit. Basically, what it looks like inside of the Arduino, they have a resistor that's plus 5 volts, ground, and this is the pin. So when we put the solid state relay here, so like this, that's an opta coupler, so you don't have the risk of the electrocution. So that resistor is all is needed. So it's about 50 milliamps goes to the output, which is enough for the solid state relay, and it can control this little one can control up to 2 amps, 120 volts, so it's more than enough.
So we're looking at each one of those black cards is one of those relays.
Yes.
So it's one switch per. So now you've got a dozen circuits right there in front of us, or
Yeah.
a dozen things to switch.
That's see how many outlets, that many solid state relays. He was soldering all of them. It's all those toxic fumes, you know.
He's got more brain cells left, so it's.
Exhaust fans.
So, so that was the idea, you know, to do the show, when you see people are watching and cheating. So, what is this all about? Basically, as we press keys on the keyboard, it turns on and off circuits, and also that effect player can autoplay certain things like, you know, change the lights in sequence or do whatever you fancy. So it can be also turned on, so it will autoplay the effects. So the show looked like, you know, there was a music playing and he was playing the light part. I think he will repeat that for this audience, I hope, if you will behave. So this is pretty much it. Very few Java classes, and that Arduino program, the entire Arduino program is right here. So here's the assignments of the pins. So see that one says output, but we had to work around it. It just didn't work as output. And the whole thing is just reads the input, and if I have to devise my little protocol to communicate from Java to the Arduino device. The Arduino device has its own language, but you have to write something to communicate with your own end. It's not like you turn it on and it magically works. No. So basically, every Arduino program has two parts: setup and the loop. It does the setup and then does the loop. So in a loop, it looks for, at that time, I was working on one big Java project. I was trying to master Scala. So the Java kind of in the middle, familiar ground. Scala was very high end, the type system was giving me headaches. This is so primitive. I was like, okay, I will read the input, the entire sequence, all the bits I need to turn on and off. It cannot do that. All it can do, read 1 byte at a time. And for the sake of kind of easy monitoring the protocol, I wanted that to be a strings, not just a couple of bytes. So I had to do some massaging. So here it basically reconstructs my command that looks like an S and the 5 digits. So basically it's a decimal number that will be turned into basically bits. So here it just does the flipping the bits depending on bits on and off in that control number.
So you just send it a word that meant which one's on and which one's wrong.
Yeah,
That was your entire protocol.
yeah.
Switching now. Switching now.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I did that part.
Yeah. Basically, yes. He did that part. That's a photo of our house, and as you press the keyboards to give the visual feedback, what's going on outside of the house, because he was inside playing at the keyboard, and outside was raining the Christmas day. So it basically draws the lines which correspond to the lights which are on. That's pretty much it, and I hope we're able to start this thing now. So the working this Arduino looks like this. This is the IDE I was talking about, and we can say upload, and it will upload the board. It has a serial monitor, and the monitor allows me to type something and send over the serial port to the Arduino. That's why I did that as a string. I'm much better typing the strings than binary numbers.
So is this a serial connector? Is it like a USB connector or anything like that, or just serial? Because I don't know how many computers these days come with serial ports now.
It's a serial over USB.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Okay, so here's the thing. 16383. This is the number. See?
Oh.
They are on. If I say S0000 and send it, they are off.
All right. So now we have to have a replay mechanism and a keyboard listener, and then we're off and running.
Well, we'll touch that in a moment. So here's the that Christmas light show.
Right, I guess.
And why don't you play something? So we'll start the program. Just already. Oh, it's not the entire here.
These are going right inside.
There's some effects, if I can remember
Yeah.
the buttons. I mean, there's one.
See, this is the auto player. Just plays this part, and we also had another effect that was circling the windows
So is it listening to the music or is this hand?
No, he is
choreographed?
listening to the music and tries to do the creative part.
So speakers we put outside and play that.
Just to annoy the neighbors, you know.
And how many people showed up for these? How many? It looked like there was a crowd outside.
Yeah, we had quite a party at our house. So how much electric engineering knowledge do you have to have to do something? Close to zero. Basically, once you understand how to connect the solid-state relays and follow kind of wiring diagram, it's easy. You can see it right here.
I'll say this, I have an Arduino and I did a robot costume for my son at Hopkins. And I took electronics in college and had to repeat, so that says something about it.
And you built it too.
How long did it take you to?
That's good.
How long we were working on that? Half a month. About half a month, but it's not like every day. You know, I had a day job. And he had to attend school.
You don't have your Arduino consultancy up and running yet?
Thank you.
I'll mention
Yeah.
part of the goal of the Arduino idea in the community is to make it possible for people who don't know electronics to do it. So there really are a lot of things to help people out, and it's pretty resilient to your burning it out. So and for $25, which is what the regular board costs, it's totally worth it to go in and
Absolutely.
try it out.
You know, I didn't predict how much fun it will be for me to turn on and off lights.
So is the best way to get it online, or where do you recommend getting
Yeah.
the kit?
Yeah.
Arduino.com or something like that?
No, I got that. There is a Maker magazine. They have Arduino and all the shields.
Spark Fun is one of the sites.
Yeah, you can find lots of retailers.
Too, they show all the
So,
projects you can do with Arduino.
Your controller and your Arduino board that you wrote in, what was that, in some reduced C or something? What was that language?
It's Arduino language.
Okay, so it is.
It's a reduced.
So the C
Yeah.
syntax on a mini scale, something without includes or something.
Without just about anything.
No, it has includes, it has libraries, you can write the libraries.
Okay,
and-
so I assume you can also read from those ports which you've declared as the inputs,
Yes.
and then send that stuff back using some serial
yes.
command.
It's actually even more interesting. For example, you can put, let's say, 2 rods in the ground and a little current through them, and depends how dry your ground is, it'll produce different resistance. So it can actually read the actual voltage, so you can figure out how dry the soil is, and let's say turn on your sprinklers. It has an analog to digital.
So some of the
Converter.
inputs have analog to digital conversion.
Yeah, right on the board.
Okay.
All
So if you
those
declare them
analog
input,
ones.
then you get a digital number back out of the.
Yes,
Out of the,
if you declare them as an analog inputs, let me go back and show that slide. So those guys are analog inputs. So I don't recall how many levels they can recognize, but I think pretty significant number.
So there's a 32-bit ADD on each one of them. or something?
256, isn't it? Isn't it an 8-bit? Or
Yeah,
just about
probably it's
8-bit?
an 8-bit.
There's like 7. Oh, 1?
Oh, 1K. So 10
That rings
bits
a
or
bell.
something.
And then the PWM ones on the top row, those can be used to like dim LEDs or to control servos without really any additional hardware. I mean, no
Yeah,
more
they're
than a
switching.
resistor.
Yeah.
So it makes it very easy to control servos. Did anybody see the Google I/O thing that Joe Bovir sent out in response to you? So they had a little demonstration with an Arduino controlling one of the labyrinth things that moves and rolls a marble through a maze.
Mhm.
And they were using an Android tablet. They were tilting and using the accelerometer to control the labyrinth. And then at the very end, they go to this, and maybe it was a different video. They go to like this huge, like almost as big as the room labyrinth that he's standing in with a big marble that's like this big. And they actually had the actual.
That's
they're
from
controlling this
Futurama.
thing from a.
Yeah, but
From the tablet as well.
I must say that Arduino has accelerometer shields as well, so you can put that shield and actually tilt the Arduino board and read that in your computer and use for gaming or
So this is
whatever.
a $50 board to get us started?
$25 board.
$25.
He got a $50 board. You can get the $25 one that has half as many pins.
How big is that?
I mean, this.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, it's right here. Let me unplug
Not
this
this
thing.
big, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is the board.
Wow.
So pass it around.
I've gotten this to work on Ubuntu
Yeah.
or something. I know I've heard it's fairly easy on Windows and Mac, but I've heard it's a little harder to like set up and port stuff on like Ubuntu.
It's probably the same. It's actually easier on Ubuntu than on the Mac, I believe.
Hmm.
But that's the challenge, how you communicate from Java to the native layer to the USB port.
I seem to remember the guy, I took a class on this a long time ago, that you can trick the analog input ports into doing signaling as well.
Yeah,
If you have an external power supply, that you can basically use them as a drain to switch
Yeah, well,
more
these are
things.
inputs, yeah, you can do.
If you need
Yeah.
That you basically
Probably
turn them off or on, and then you can get
But that
more.
suggests you start putting smarts in the Arduino. His solution was, you know,
yeah.
set
All the
your
brain
command.
is in a big device.
Yeah, in the bigger device. That's actually a good approach.
Yes,
so,
Nima.
you mentioned one cool idea about the sprinkler system. Is there any other like really cool ideas that people have done with this?
Oh yeah, if you go to the Arduino site, there is a whole wiki that has a list of ideas. It's pages and pages and pages of ideas. Lots of instructables, yes.
How much RAM are we talking on the board? I mean, you weren't using much, but what's the actual capacity?
We can pull up the data sheet for
I
this
had
device.
it here a minute ago. Let me see if I still have it. I think it's 32 data and 2K of
No, it's
see,
more
no,
than
it's
that.
backward. Yeah, it's 32K of data. It looks like.
There's a number of different versions as well, because it's an
Yeah.
open source design. A number of folks have made variants.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry, I'm
there's
looking at the
different
Uno.
versions over time too.
But it's enough that you could run something serious on the board. And you wouldn't have to.
So it's a 256 kilobytes of
On the Mega. Yeah.
flash memory. I don't recall how much.
But I think
RAM
the
it
Mega
has.
has more than the regular one as well.
It
How
does.
much, how much was it?
256.
This says 128K.
Now you put flash.
You see, that's the number. That's how much my little program used, and that's how much is available.
So I can't get Skype on there. That's like 100 megabytes, right? So
Well, that depends though. I mean, what you've done essentially there is move the computation off the board to your laptop.
Yeah.
And you're basically using the board to drive the lights, right? So you could do something like that where, you know, I don't know, maybe a smartphone that has a USB output or something like that, hooked up to the
Yeah.
board or something.
That's the Google
So-
I/O. They allow that
Whatever.
Remember, they
Android to use as a controller for the Arduino boards.
they're only 16 megahertz, so you're not going to run 100 megabit Ethernet.
But surprisingly, you can actually run the web server of the Arduino board
You
itself.
can, as long as the packet rate comes in slow enough that the shield can. soak
But
it
you
up.
can.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, we can.
They don't have one with. They don't have one with hardware flow control yet, do they? On the input.
I don't think so. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
Stop asking the deep technical questions. Yes, Jason.
I want to mention two local businesses. One of them has come to the CJUD. That's the Ada Technical Bookstore off of Broadway. They have Arduino and other kind of maker stuff. And then just a few doors over is a place called Matrix Create that has like introduction to electronics. They sell this kind of stuff. They have like a workspace. They have all the gear, 3D printing, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if anybody's ever been down there. But two very cool local businesses
Now where are those?
up on Broadway, on Capitol Hill.
Oh.
I think I've heard of people building 3D printers and like router controllers. If you want to like take a piece of wood and then like have a router control to do text and all of that, people use Arduinos to control those kinds of things.
And then for the actual debugging of it, you get some feedback through the serial port. It's like you can send.
Yeah, it sends back to the
Okay.
serial
So
port.
that's not too hard to figure out.
What did your robot suit do?
Oh yeah, so my son's robot suit had a little LEDs across the top that would go back and forth Cylon style, and then it had glowing eyes, so he was looking out the mouth, and then the eyes could go either white or red with big LEDs. I went to Radio Shack and got the brightest, biggest LEDs the Arduino could support, and then hacked a network cable to go from the head down to the Arduino, which was on his chest, in like a Ziploc brand, like little snap container. That I painted the whole thing silver. And then it had a potentiometer in the middle so he could dim the eyes, and there's a 3-position switch to go off or white or red, so he could be angry robot or happy robot. And make the lights brighter or darker, so. And then an on-off switch with a couple LEDs for showing that.
That's
So.
pretty awesome. That's dead, isn't it?
That's what yeah, I totally want.
What was that shop that you mentioned? Maker something?
There's Metrics Create,
Metrics Create.
and then near that is Ada's Technical Bookstore. And they've come here to, I try to shop like for Wingding for our study books. I try to shop for them because they're local business.
Yeah, they did a raffle, I believe, for
Yeah,
like a book or
really
a couple
cool
books or
people.
something. Yeah, been here before.
The thing that one of the things I liked about it is having a potentiometer on there, instead of like having to figure out like the circuitry to make a potentiometer
Electronics.
work, because I always sucked with the electronics, even though I really wanted to do it, is if you just plug every light and every switch into the Arduino, then I can do it in software, and I can change the program just by uploading a new program, and now the potentiometer does something different, It can make a sound or whatever.
So
So
once
for
you
me as a
learn the
software
range
guy,
of
I
the-
just like having as little hardware as possible, whatever it takes to get the program.
That's why we're programmers. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're a number,
Of
and
course,
then you
eventually-
control something with that, you can
Yeah,
drive it
once
back
you,
out.
once you say whether it's an input port or an output port and connect something up to it, then the program does the work.
Right.
Eventually, you'll burn out your Arduino if you don't put some resistors in there.
No, I figured out the right resistors. There's a couple online tools to help.
All right, cool.
All right.
Any other
that's it.
questions? All right, well, thanks, Konstantin. I guess next we have Anna, who's going to be talking about grails and kind of what she's
switch.
learned about using grails. So I guess while she's getting set up over here, has anybody played with Lego Mindstorms? Yeah. Because that's some just okay. Well, perfect. You're probably best qualified to speak about what your experience was with that versus say the Arduino. Because it seems like it's kind of similar, right? It's again controlling electronics and hardware using software and programming and stuff, right?
Well, I think he is
It's
more
not
qualified.
All right.
It's less coding, it's just kind of visualize.
With the Mindstorms? Okay. So this is a little bit more low level then.
Yeah.
Okay. But it gives you that much more control than I take it too. Maybe.
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe not. All right.
I'm not too familiar with code, so.
Okay.
A couple of things. Mindstorms has its own kind of Java language called
Yeah.
JOS. And it's definitely more low level because you have to build all your robots on Legos. So, they don't really get that small.
So there's still some assembly
It's
involved.
cool for really rapid development though.
Okay.
Build another robot, write your code, and send it on its way. So,
Well, it's just fun. It's a toy.
So it's more like a toy, more fun.
Yeah.
Whereas this is more, you can do some serious stuff with it if you want it.
Something.
Yeah.
Well, I seem to recall with the Mindstorms, there was kind of 2 levels. You could take it out. There was the development system that they gave you that was basically just visually plugging logic blocks together. And then there's all sorts of community tools available that actually let you write code in a more traditional programming language and do, get more fine control of what you're doing.
Well, actually, all those tools these days pretty much outdated. It was a kind of big community when they just released that, but these days I try those tools, but the hardware itself is too limited. For example, it has cool things like it has you can say you can make it speak, but it has so small memory you cannot do much there. So you can prepare all the language and all that, but it just doesn't fit into the memory. It's very limited.
So is the current generation of Mindstorms then, is it like less capable than what their original sets, or is it
I think
just
they didn't change it at all.
Okay, it's just the what people want to do is moved on.
Yeah.
No, that is Lego.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably.
Well, because I mean, I remember when they came out, like the hacker community just like leaped on it and was doing all sorts of cool stuff. But apparently, that all that energy is moved to Arduino now.
Oh yeah,
I guess so. All right, cool. So I guess with that, Anna, all yours.
So switching completely into the web server mode. So how many people here done Grails or quite a few, and Groovy? Oh, more. Okay, good. All right. So I actually very little experience with Grails myself as well, but I started off with Groovy a couple of years ago doing some more testing for web services using Groovy, and then sort of didn't do too much more with it till very recently. About a year ago, started getting a little bit more into Grails, and just really loved the simplicity of it. So before that, I was doing Spring MVC and the Hibernate and Spring MVC Direct, and it was just really refreshing to do it in Grails instead. So I'm gonna present only like a couple of examples, so it's gonna be a little haywire. So please feel free to ask questions. I hope it doesn't appear too haywire. So this was the website I built. It's called GardenNet. I actually built two. This one I did in about 2 months' time with Grails, and then I added a bunch of stuff with it for about a month. Then I thought of another idea, and then I basically took a lot of the code from GardenNet and built local bias, which is kind of local, very hyper-local sort of citizen reporting type site. So anybody can go and post stuff about what's happening in your locality and share that. So it's really just me right now. Feel free to post. So this actually went live, I think, probably last week. So this, I only, so I'm just trying to get people to post, but even, writing a few lines is kind of hard, even for me.
What's your web server? What are you running this in?
Well, just actually, great question. So there is the start of my presentation, and I'm so glad my husband made me write the slide now. I was not doing that one, because obviously you have to do all the graphics and stuff. But he wanted to know how I was deploying it. So it's deployed on the Amazon cloud. I'm using 3 servers now. This is showing 2. So there's the RDS, which is a server, and this one is a server, and that's just S3 storage, and that's used for the images. So you upload images, and you upload the images, they get stored into S3. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But 2 servers running on the Linux box. There's a Solar Search server, which it used the 4.0 version. It's in dev, but it's still pretty stable, and it has geospatial search capabilities. That was really the kind of both these sites. That's the common theme in there, is the geospatial search. And then there's Grails running on Tomcat, just the standard Tomcat server. So when I did the second site, so this was GardenNet. So when I did the second site, I just repeated one of these for the second site, and it went to the same RDS. Go ahead.
So remind us what is S3 is a general file storage service from Amazon. And
yeah, it's a key value pair sort of storage.
Oh, okay. So
So you give it a key and you store whatever you want, a file, for example, a key data, I guess.
Okay.
So in this case, it's key would be, you know, I generate just GUIDs, and then the data would be the actual image file or image data. And then you can access it directly from S3. So it's a URL that accesses it. So when somebody is accessing an image from the client, it goes straight there. It doesn't go through here.
Oh, okay. So once you understand the URL scheme, then you put that in the page and it goes.
Exactly.
And I think on the right is
The relational database.
MySQL.
MySQL.
Fancy name for MySQL.
Wait, yeah, I believe they support some other ones, but yeah, I'm using MySQL. There's a question there.
How much does it cost?
So, 2 servers is about 140 a month, and the third server I think is going to be about 200 a month. So 2 websites.
And it also depends on the volume, right? For the S3.
Yeah, I don't have that much volume. It's kind of under the it's under the yearly limit.
Is
For,
it?
I think it's like gig of transfer is free for a
First
year.
5 gig.
For 5 gig?
First
Okay,
You haven't
there
gotten
go.
there yet. You're still at the 0 point, which is
Yeah,
it's a couple
I'm
hundred
low.
bucks.
I'm good. I'm good there. It's just the cost of the
I
static.
could build a penny a month for my stuff.
You do? Yeah, I think.
They offer a 1-year free deal. So you can-
Yeah, that's the micro. I didn't go for that. It's
Actually, yeah, that's one question I had was, how did you size the box? Is it one box that's running both solar and Tomcat?
yeah, it was a gig box. I think this was a small.
So those are 2 VMs running in the same box?
No, it's just this one is Jetty and that's Tomcat. So there's 2 servers running on the
Right.
same OS.
And they're running like in a gig fine, no problem. I mean, it's,
No
it's kind
problem.
of a constrained sort of an environment, right?
Yeah, but I haven't had. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like, oh, as soon as I need it, I can replicate this part. So that's not a big deal.
Is it stateless, or you mean like for
Yeah.
scalability? Okay.
Exactly,
Okay.
because that's the state, right?
Right,
It's
okay.
mostly stateless.
Okay.
There is, but there is session stickiness. You know, you can get session stickiness with the load balancer. So they have an elastic load balancer. I haven't got there yet. You might, Thomas might know more about that if you want to ask him, because they do that at Precore as well.
Yeah.
So they deploy their stuff on the Amazon cloud. So I used to run GardenNet actually from my house on a server. And who remembers that big storm? Yeah, so that sort of stuff.
But Anna, to be fair, though, wasn't Amazon down?
Yeah,
like
Amazon
2
was
weeks
down
ago?
a couple
There's
weeks
some-
I don't know, it was, but that was one day, you know. And
Classic logic.
yeah, I don't have to worry about people kicking the wires and stuff.
That's
You
big
know,
storm.
or
Who
watching
needs the garden?
TV or any of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much gardening going on when the big storm.
Yeah. Well, this is
How do I save my
nationals,
tomatoes?
in some place there is, yeah.
When they're inside,
Yeah, that's when they're on the network looking for things to do when it stops raining.
Oh, okay. You'll be ready during the storm. Ah, there.
How do I save my tomatoes from the storm?
Yeah, we didn't have internet connection to ask anybody. Alright, so this is kind of going straight into the Grail stuff. People seen the paginate plugin in Grails? So Grails is a whole lot of, actually this one is not even plugin, this is actually comes with the Grails part. So it does this portion. Let me show you. So if I go, for example, marketplace. So this part, it computes how many to show, what page number you're at, and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to, you don't actually end up writing this code separately. Puts a next button if you're on the first page. If you go to the
So
second
it actually
page.
maintains like the state and everything of where the user is and all that also?
No, it's completely stateless. So it's getting
it's in
its
the
data
URL.
out of that offset and
Well, yeah, I mean, it passes the state back and forth, I
yeah,
guess, with the
yeah,
request.
yeah. So
But
then
it manages that for you, basically.
exactly. So you don't have to do anything.
Well,
Can you have more than one on
the
the
state is on the client. It cannot be stateless.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, so it's in the
Yeah,
state
you
was
should-
in the URL, yeah.
Yeah, the state
It's
state passes back and
stateless, you
forth.
Yeah.
mean the server is stateless.
Servers is stateless, yeah. The server side plugin is stateless. So I had this done without the paging initially. So I had this, you know, trying to do it in 2 months. It's like, okay, what else can I throw out and not do? And get it up there quickly so that the web crawlers can get there. So obviously since there's no data in the beginning, there's no need for paging. So it was so I started adding paging later, and I had the list of IDs already being returned, and now I wanted to return the total as well, because in the paging up there, I needed to know the total so it can produce that line of how many, links to produce. And initially, I started off with, the typical Java one, the Java way of doing it, either extend it or encapsulate it or somehow, create a new list which contains a list, and then it contains the total, and then you start, changing everywhere where you're using the list to the new list. Anybody done that with Hibernate before? I did that before when I was working on a different project. But I remembered that Grails has something, or Groovy rather, it has the capability of adding any field to the class. And it took me just a couple of minutes to figure out that I could just do this ID, just add .metaclass.total. Now the list IDs, it has a field called total, and that can be accessed anywhere. So that was something you can't get in Spring MVC. There's probably a bunch of stuff here.
So on the fly,
Could have just
on the
inheritance or something.
yeah, on the fly.
Actually, changing the definition of the object itself on the fly, right?
Yeah.
Sort of mix in.
Yeah.
It
Because that's attaching that total to the instance, not to the. So it's not like all lists have a total. This
It's
list
not
has
like
a
a
total.
Yeah,
prototype.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Right.
That's true, but at the same time, I guess it's more a syntactical trick in a sense.
So it's kind of like JavaScript.
But yeah, but you now I have like, oh, it's IDs.total. It's
Right.
just got this field. So I can see, if you have designed your objects to put hash maps everywhere, you might have that.
So, like numerical question, how is it different from JavaScript prototype, adding something to prototype?
I don't think it is. This is server side.
Okay.
That's JavaScript is not
Well,
web server language.
I think you mean conceptually.
Conceptually, yes.
Yeah, conceptually
It's very
different.
similar.
Very
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just something that wasn't available to me in Java. So, any bird notice fans here? No?
Do you have I heard, when I was using Groovy in Grails, I found myself wanting to use types so that the IDE would limit the methods that it would show me.
Yeah.
But I heard that actually slows, at that time, that slowed the performance of Grails, or Groovy, I was told.
That doesn't make any sense
Yeah.
to me. I mean, the great thing I like about Groovy is the fact that you can use as many types as you can use types where they are helpful and not use them where they're just getting in the way.
Exactly.
But ultimately, not using a type just means you're declaring everything object, and then of course Java knows what it is at runtime, as it always has. But yeah, whether you declare a type or not really has no impact on performance.
So you've got some
It
kind
still sucks.
So you've got some kind of closure kind of operations going on here.
Yeah, so I used to use GPath a lot more for testing XML. In this case, this is a Solr search result coming back. So the Solr query I was sending from the Tomcat server to the Jetty server was just a REST call. It's just a URL, a get URL, and this would be the response coming back, the IDs of the documents that match. And this is the parsing logic for it.
The entire parsing.
That's the entire parsing logic gives the IDs. Just gets the IDs out. So response dot result, depth first search, find all docs, collect all the IDs, and we determine the ID from the doc.str.findAll with name ID, the text value of that, convert that into long and return that. And that gets collected into a list of IDs. That's it. It's very cryptic. And then the count is kind of similar. More questions on that?
I have a little bit about the previous one. So, sorry, the one before that still. So you're basically doing that because you want to you want to avoid creating a class where you wrap the total in the list.
Yeah.
What's so bad about creating?
Well,
that?
you create the class. You either have to derive it from list, and then you have to change the type everywhere,
Oh, yes,
wherever
that's
you're
what happened,
accessing it. You have to typecast it before you can get the count out, right? So all that
And
kind
it's
of, you know,
fine. So you can
It's sort of like using closures, right? I mean, you don't want to have everything be a function that's defined, and you just want to use something on the fly.
yeah. I think in this case, like the loose typing kind of helps.
Also, you can use this if you, for a snippet of your code, would prefer to have a new method on string that Java doesn't have. You can use this meta object protocol to do that.
Yeah, so you can, it's not just about adding fields. You can actually add ID. You know, you can have ID dot get total equals, and then write a method, and now it has a new method.
But it's just to that instance, right?
I think the method is still to that instance only.
So when you do new,
You can do both.
you can do that.
Okay, so I haven't tried the other one. So he'll have to show me later.
But your list of things returned for display messages or products or articles, you always need that total because of the API for drawing the pictures, for drawing the little next
Yeah.
page button.
Yeah.
So every time you make one of those lists, you add a total and then make sure you calculate the total.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So another feature I added with GardenNut was whoever the registered people who registered, they get their own sort of site. So every time they post stuff on the marketplace, they get, with all their postings, they get their own site. So it looks like, so for example, he's got a bunch of postings, and you click on that. That's graywolf.gardenNut.com. So that's automatically created. And there is the open.
So he's selling things on your site under a subdomain, okay?
Yeah, so create the subdomain automatically. So I was trying to figure out how to route that subdomain to the correct URL. So I was looking at multiple options, like, oh, should I put an Apache server in front and try to do rewrite? Should I use Tomcat? Tomcat has a rewrite module now. And or should I do a filter within, create a custom filter? It turned out the simplest thing to do was to use URL mappings, which already comes with grails. And this is what it looks like. This is the URL mappings file, which is controller, action ID, all that stuff. And this I added custom. So for /site/action, controller becomes, if the thing starts with the server name, you make it index, otherwise, or home, I think, otherwise go to site. And then ID, it takes the ID from graywolf.gardenNut.com, pulls out the graywolf part, puts that as the ID. So now it goes to the site controller, to a completely different controller. So in the URL mappings itself, I could just convert this. It took me half a day to figure out what I wanted to do, and less than an hour to actually do it. So, so that worked out pretty good. So again, the power here was, the URL mappings. You can have them as simple values, or you can include closures within the URL mappings. So this is a closure that's returning a value that the controller that it should use as a controller. So you can put in a whole bunch of logic here. There's no restriction. Once it's a function, essentially. Ooh, tag lives. So, who writes a lot of tag lives in? Anybody? No, not really. So, when I started, I didn't write a single one of them in Grails either. It was just didn't try, just from previous experiences. So this is all you need to do. Just put the file in taglib directory, call it something taglib, give it a namespace. That namespace then is used to call that tag library, and then define what it is. And and the functions look like attributes in body. You just get that. I think a more complex one of that was this distance computation. This distance computation shows up everywhere on the site, and it's all done by this tag library. How many miles from you? That distance computation is all done by this tag library, and it just returns the result. This was kind of a fun part of the application. I hadn't done this before. Ajax image upload. I didn't write the front-end portion of it. This was written by Andrew Ballum. If you Google it, it comes, Ajax image uploader. I think it comes out to be one of the top ones. I just wrote the server side of it for Grails. There was actually a plugin in Grails to do the image upload, but it has some issues. It's missing this part. This part with the, where in some cases where the browser doesn't support HTML5, it tries to do an iframe and a form and submit the form within that iframe, a dynamic form. So in that case, you kind of have to use this stuff. But let me show you what it looks like. That will be more interesting. So if I'm posting an item, I go upload image. So now it's uploading it. When it's done uploading, it changes the source attribute underneath the, from underneath it. So the image actually shows up here. At this point, it's only saved on the Tomcat server. It's not actually in the permanent S3 storage. But when I click submit, that's when it gets submitted to the S3 storage.
So that was an AJAX? Oh.
How big are the images that go up to S3?
So I pre-process them to maximum of 100 KB. So if you're loading a 4 MB image or something like that, it actually, even while uploading initially, it reduces the size and crops it to the center of the image. And then just, did that answer your question, or?
Yes.
Was that,
So,
was it a question?
so once
You
it's
were
smaller,
asking-
it actually crops it. It doesn't actually reduce it.
No, good. In this one, in local BIOS, I cropped it. In GardenNet, it was reduction. Because GardenNet is professional sellers, they know what their images are. This is more, you and me, most of the time we're doing a camera image, it should be horizontal. If you did it vertical, it's okay, I'll crop it. Because it'll look much better on the site otherwise. Otherwise, the site will look kind of weird. Various versions of the image. And I looked at Google News, they crop it too, so.
That always works.
So there we go. That
Well,
should show up.
you're posting the preview anyway, right? So if someone really doesn't like the image, they can just cancel it
Correct.
and do it again.
Yeah, they can just hit on the upload image again and just create. Yeah, exactly.
How are you doing the distance? Are you using, they just put their zip code in their profile, or are you actually using some geo?
So it's. Oh, it went off on the side here. Sorry. So this is. So for this one, you can basically type in anything that'll show on the Google map, and then it geocoded on the client, not on the server. Anybody know why? Because I'm trying to save money. Because if you do it on the server, you have more than a certain number of calls, then they charge you. So, but if you do it on the client, they don't care.
So each person's browser makes a call to the Google map to find a location, and then you
Yeah.
pick that up and submit it.
So if I type in, that's the geocode happened already. So I already have the lat long. Now I'll pass it to the server, and that's what will get stored on the server. So it's quite fast. So and you can decide a search radius and submit. The geographical search stuff, that's Solar. So if I'm saying search only within a certain area, that's when Solar kicks in and it does the filtering.
Did you experiment with Google location API?
No. Was that, sorry, what does that do?
It's just a way for the user to authorize your app to know exactly where the user is.
Oh.
And they have a database of, say, Wi-Fi hotspots that they can just triangulate your location.
Oh, that's a good idea. So you can initially show them, oh, maybe this is where we
So
think.
sometimes the browsers, the modern browsers, will know where they are, and then
Uh-huh.
you can enable that page to have that value. It's a HTML5 feature. Basically, it's for
Phones, but yeah.
the phone knows where it is. Can it pass it down to the website that's on the
You
phone?
could do an IP lookup too, though. I mean, it's not like accurate, but again, the idea
Well,
is to pre-fill.
it's better to ask the HTML APIs.
Yeah, you ask
Email
where is this browser running?
And then they
do
find the
something
best. They define the best way how to do that.
Well, it's even more than that. Google maintains a database. They got in trouble for this. MAC addresses for WAF gateways, and so even by knowing just the IP, they can get it down to say within your block, or even closer, which is
Which
pretty
is,
good.
this is pretty much more than that.
But anyway, somehow the point is the browser can report
Mm-hmm.
to your website.
Yeah,
And
and
if
that
it's
would be a very
illegal
good.
or authorized, whatever, the browser is saying
Hey,
the
Paul.
machine told me.
That's not an iPhone, is
This one? No, but it can report location too and HTML5. So
They're just crowdsourcing.
They all can.
they all.
it?
They all do unless you tell them not to.
That's right.
Go ahead.
So you're saying you're paying $140 a month for this? How much would it cost to implement some other technologies? Have you researched that, or?
The software doesn't cost anything. It's the hardware.
Yeah,
Oh, you mean in terms of the deployment?
yeah. Like if you were to I don't know.
I think Rackspace kind of stuff costs a lot more, considerably more.
For
Java
you
hosting?
can have a decent server. If you don't
Yeah.
mind maintaining that yourself and doing the backups, it's
Yeah. So with the RDS, you get the backup stuff. You click a button and it backs up your whole database. It's nice. Or you could write the script, but
You could
Yeah.
probably get the cost down with like virtual private servers, the sort of the more old school non-cloud stuff.
yeah. When I was running it from home, I mean, it was lower cost, but it's like about $100 for the static IP type connection anyway. So it's like, okay.
So what other like cloud platforms did you consider besides Amazon for hosting your?
So it used to run from my house, so that was the other one I considered.
So, do you consider like Google App Engine or I think Rackspace
No.
now has some?
Google App
Yeah.
Engine is very custom. You cannot run, let's say, MySQL there. So basically, Grails will not work there with the what's the layer on top of?
GWT?
No.
JVM.
It's a limited subset of the JVM.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I mean the
database interaction?
yeah, the database.
JPA or.
No,
they have
it's
Groovy
Persistence
thing.
mechanism?
Big
It's
table.
big
Big
table.
table.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
JK1 or JDO. Yeah, and it's very limited. It's kind of one table-ish. You guys
Basically,
can do it.
all the Grails magic will not work there.
Anybody else know?
But there's Stacks. I think it got bought out by somebody. That's also another cloud hosting provider.
Cloud Foundry just got relaunched. That's the Spring Source.
They have bought Stacks.
Oh, VMware.
VMware.
It's
VMware.
VMware's
Yeah.
thing, yeah.
Yeah.
They just
And then
relaunched.
How price? What's the price comparison between them and Amazon?
You know, I actually find the Amazon pricing very confusing to tell you the truth.
It is.
I've looked at it and they got all these fancy calculators and stuff, but it almost sounds like nickel and diming or something like that, you know? I mean,
I guess
Just
it's like you
buy the
gotta try
service
it.
and see what the bill looks like after a year.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, which is kind of scary.
That's what I like the casinos. They figured it all out.
That's right. Once run anywhere.
First time I did it, and I didn't know.
But then you can turn it off anytime. Like,
Go.
you can say bye-bye. So the thing I like, somebody else was also mentioning this, thing I like about using the Ruby Trail stuff is you can still use all the Java libraries that we're so fond of. So Jet S3T is one of those libraries. It's used to upload, connect to S3 programmatically and upload images and things like that. So initially trying to run this directly in the service is very, you have to stop, restart your server constantly. So initially I did this as a script. Just run it as a Groovy script on my box so I can just keep running it again and again and till it finally works. So you basically listing all the buckets, that's just a test. But here's where I took a file and I'm uploading it to S3 and putting that object there to test whether it works. The final code actually looks much smaller. That's it. State service and upload the file. The read doesn't go through the web server. The read goes straight to S3. This was funny. I had written GardenNet initially a long time ago, 5-6 years ago, in Java. It was a much more reduced functionality set, but it did have that mailing, the mail service portion, and I dug it up and I was doing the comparison. There's a mail service plugin in Grails, and that was the lines of code to do that in Grails versus that was in Java. And then the host, user, password, these were all constants that I had to declare. And this was all in there in the config in Grails.
You did take the most horrible piece of API in the whole Java.
There's no swing in there. What are you talking about?
But even the
This
playing
wins
field,
from swing, in my opinion.
to even the playing field, she made the left one a bigger font.
Yeah. I was like, oh my god, this is not taking enough space. I wrote a lot of web services before, so it was a lot of it was get this value, set this value, get set. Where the controllers are concerned, at least, all that just disappears. If you're in your params, if the name of the field matches the name of the field in the domain object, you just have to do this. Add equal new advert params, and anything that matches the name in the param gets copied over. Done.
If there's a null constructor and it just calls all the setters, is that what?
Yeah.
Using the Java Beans pattern. Okay.
Yeah. And the same, you can do add.properties equal to params when you're doing an update. So it'll update anything. So if you already have a pre-initialized add, then you just do add.properties equal to.
No, I was just gonna, so basically creates like your data structure that contains all the parameters.
Yeah. It took me a little while to discover this because I was just happily typing away and then I saw something.
Name equals, title equals.
Yeah. So in the GardenNet code, there's places where it's like, oh, it's all typed out, and then suddenly I discovered something else, and off it went. That all got cleaned up in the second app. So, oh, this was really fun. I was sitting down, it was like a couple of days from trying to launch it, and I'm sitting down to tea, and I'm just going over my mind about all the things that, do I need to do this and that and that. And it's like, I remember testing, when something updates, it shows up at the top of the list, and, it's ordered in descending order of dates, so it's working, but I don't remember actually doing anything about it. I remember seeing this stuff, which is, I should write the before update and before insert and before update, do all this stuff. But I didn't actually do any of it. So I ran down to check what was going on, and I found this little line in the Grails documentation. And they had given all these examples, and then there was this little line saying, by just defining them, these are just examples. This is not necessary, though, for these fields. If you just define these fields, they'll just work. It's like, oh, wow. Okay, that works for me. One less thing to do. So anyway, I created, I think I had before that creation date, I just converted all that to date created, so just to make it easy on me.
So that's using a pattern, using by convention as opposed to.
Yeah, that's a really good example of the convention that, I just came upon by.
If it finds it, it uses it.
Yeah. When I did site mesh before, it was the layouts, site mesh layouts, they didn't actually, you couldn't use the model that was in, because the filter sat in front of Spring MVC, so the Spring MVC model was not really visible to the site mesh filter. But I don't know, they fixed that in Grails, so it's available in the Grails implementation of or the Grails layer. Grails underneath also, I believe it uses site mesh for its layouts, but they pass it the model as well. So you can do things like, so this is now switching, basically what this does is it switches site templates. So there's a couple of different site templates for this one. So that's a different color, then you can do a couple of different templates, color templates. So if it's a different template, I think mine was then you just I'm way at the end because obviously I put my stuff up first just to test it. So mine's a different color template. So that switch is happening in the site mesh template. And that's where it's getting the value. So the model, the entire site model is passed to it. And even the page layout template, you can grab hold of that. So they did, it seems like somebody did a good job of fixing some of the issues that people often see. So I think after I did that, I discovered filters more. So I have more filters now, and I'm still kind of continuing to discover more stuff about Rails. It's been fun, so try it out.
Does your site support purchasing? I see you've got list of products with prices there.
Sorry, say again?
I see you have your site has a list of products with the prices. You can actually purchase stuff through the site?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's more you have to contact the person who's selling it.
Okay.
It's more like Craigslist.
Yeah.
Information.
Yeah. More information, more limited to gardening farms and nurseries.
It's actually very easy to turn to PayPal. All you need is
Yeah.
the link.
I think it's not the problem of that. It's the problem is more the shipping calculation. They have to put in everything about all the shipping calculation and all that stuff. So the pricing calculation has to be very accurate for that. And with plants and produce, it's very hard to get that.
Do they? So you showed the mail code. Does the site act as a broker for the mail exchange, the message exchange?
Yeah, it does.
So did you have to implement CAPTCHA to prevent spammers?
I haven't yet, but there's a Grails plugin for JCAPTCHA.
There is a plugin for that.
Yep, there's a plugin for that. It's Grails, it's like now, yeah, there's a plugin for that, and if there isn't, write one.
And so once the mail is sent, then the seller would just respond directly to the client?
Yeah.
So you're not in the loop there?
No, not after that. The first mail goes through the site. So.
So just out of curiosity, sorry, you said you use Jetty for solar and using Tomcat for Grails.
Why?
Just out of curiosity.
It's just sort of what happens. Solar comes with a Jetty
it came
install,
with it, okay.
So I just started using it.
Okay.
And I was like, oh well, the ports are separate. I don't have to worry about two clashing. Why not just keep using it? And STS, which is what I was using, Spring Tool Suite for Grails, that automatically pulls in the Tomcat plugin. So it automatically runs in Tomcat. And
That's
just
the
familiarity.
IDE, right?
Sorry?
That's the IDE, right? The IDE from Spring.
Yeah, the Spring Tool Suite, that's the IDE from Spring. So there was a better question.
How about integrating ads? I see there's ads on the right-hand side.
Yeah, that was just Google Ads. That's just pure JavaScript. There's a couple of pure JavaScript things here. The buttons at the bottom. The ads are completely. It's just a very simple JavaScript. You grab it and you just put it in there.
The Facebook and Twitter stuff at the bottom, is that also like just JavaScript and stuff?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, it's just
So
JavaScript.
you have a standard footer tile or something, you stick it in there, and it has all that.
Yeah.
So can you do like traffic analysis stuff? Does it produce logs?
Yeah, there is server-side, full server-side logs. It's just turned on the, there's a access log valve in Tomcat. I just turned that on. It logs it, so at least I can tell, you know, how fast the site is running and where people are dropping off. But it doesn't really tell me who's there, right?
So you actually have people from Texas selling plants on your website?
Yeah, yeah.
You
There's
go
some.
with plants
Actually,
from-
I did this. No, let me
They
see.
actually
That
have
comes up.
plants in Texas.
Apparently they do.
There are lots of pushers.
So this is the. I guess I can go zoom out.
There you go, look at that.
Wow.
So there's east, west, whatever, all over the place. There's the map of. It's mostly within U.S., but there's a couple of registrations from abroad.
The interesting thing is the East Coast and West Coast. I mean, I would have expected the Midwest to be part of it.
Yeah,
They're all
it's,
farmers,
it
they already
is.
have their plants.
I guess so, yeah.
I think
There
this
is
is more.
corn and corn.
There's a wheat part in there too.
I think that's
Steam farm.
probably more
That's in
industrial
North
farming, whereas this
Yeah.
is, there's more hobby farming on the
That's why we
coast.
There is no internet there either.
Any
No, there's-
internationals there? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, there's a couple of international registrations, especially Canada and then there's UK. But nobody's posted from there yet. There was a few registrations that I saw, you know, they're using the Canadian code.
So what was the biggest bug or biggest pain point in developing this?
In developing on Grails or developing this, for me it was more the JavaScript. Because actually the whole CSS, HTML, JavaScript, because I had to, for a while I've been doing server-side development, like pure server-side web services and stuff. So getting back into all that stuff. But it was definitely made a lot simpler by jQuery. So, but still, you know, getting a handle on all that and doing the artwork, doing the designs, all of that stuff was harder than, you know, just doing the Grails development and that.
And are you writing tests for these? Or?
Oh no, nothing. 2 months, you know, it's like zero tests. It just works.
If you were to write tests, what would you use to test, like Selenium or something?
I really wanted to try out all the Grails stuff when you say Grails create controller, it automatically creates tests for that controller. So I have been ignoring that whole test directory. So it's actually high time for me to get into it. And I think Thomas is going to make me.
Is this hobby or startup?
It's mostly hobby at this point. I mean, obviously, there is some money going into it, you know, the $140, $200 a month. So it would be nice if it kind of became break-even. If it reached a break-even point, I would be kind of happy. I would be happy with that.
And what did you try to advertise this?
Say again?
What did you try to advertise this?
Oh, to do? Oh, I can't tell you that. That was all free and all things you should not do. You turn the camera off, I'll talk about that.
Well, sometimes we go up the street for beers afterwards.
But I did, like, for Local by Us, I took you know, the simplest kind of printout of a little flyer and go to like community center and they have boards, you can post them there. So it's just simple stuff like that. Zero cost type stuff.
So you actually, it's an interesting business model. You've got people going and you're part of the city of starting to use this for posting news, or is it happening, or?
Yeah, I'm posting. You gotta wait for other people to post.
The new Yelm super business startup.
Yeah, you've heard of Lean Startup, right? Yeah, Lean Startup is you do something and then you go back to work for food. Which is what I'm about to do too. Well, this, you know, continues to run. So Google has, this is what I found out about when I first ran GardenNut, and it was unfortunate that I shut it down. Google has a couple of year cycle before it really starts liking your site. It likes things to stay there for a while before it'll start showing up in search results. So if it stays, then it eventually will start showing up. That's the hope. You know, that the The big guys won't drive it out completely. But you kind of have to have that staying power if you're doing a very lean type of stuff. I think it's a 2 to 3 year cycle, and if after the 3 year thing it's not really working, then you can consider, closing it. But I'd say if you're doing a zero, so that 2 to 3 year time period, you can compress that by putting in a lot of money in advertising, which is what a lot of startup money goes into advertising, huge amount of it. It doesn't go as much into engineering as we think it does, but so you can compress that, and you can find out a lot faster. But then you have to be breaking even on a $200 a month thing is not an option at that point, right? If I start breaking even in 2 years, I'm still okay with that. But if you take a couple of $1 million funding, you start breaking even in the sense that you're making $200 a month. They're basically going to pull their money, right? So it's worth trying if you're willing to be patient about it.
I think maybe if you want to make a lot of money, you consider a wheat nut.
Oh, what?
Wheat nut?
Wheat nut?
Instead of garden nut.
Wheat is very expensive right now, is it?
Weed, like weeds.
Wheat. Oh, yeah, I was very scared
That's
of
a whole
people
different
trying
kind
to
of
post
gardening
that.
there.
It's
fun though.
What I know.
Just make sure your app's internationalized properly.
Yeah, put the camera on.
Actually, has anyone tried to abuse it by selling gardening plants?
Not yet, but the one set of forums that I didn't put in too much into is the California ones. Yeah, the weed stuff kind of scared me. I don't want to.
Seattle, HempFest.
Will you get a free advertisement?
British Columbia.
I know, I start getting so many hits.
So one quick question on the garden nut. You talked a little bit about how you do the subdomain mapping in Grails, but is it actually automated, the assigning the subdomains in the first place? If I go there and create a user account, do I get a subdomain?
Yeah,
or?
yeah, just
So
automatically.
So how did you do that part of it? How did you?
So when you
operate
do a
subdomains?
username, it's basically for each username there's a canonical username, which is the username allows you spaces and dots and all that stuff, because you want to be able to display that as the user wants it. And then we strip out all that stuff and make it the canonical name, and that gets also stored, and that has to be unique as well. So
And then you're pushing that into DNS somewhere?
No.
Yeah.
So from the DNS point of view, anything star.gardenut.com is coming to the server.
Oh, okay.
So you can do a star.gardenut.com coming to this server, and then
And
when it
so
gets
that
here,
passes
we
up
take the
to-
first part
Okay.
out as ID and
All
pass
right.
it in.
So she's created her own virtual DNS, so to speak.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
something
the wild card. That's,
That's
what
pretty
I.
cool.
Yeah.
That's what I didn't
Yeah.
think of.
pretty neat.
Yeah,
Very nice.
All right, well,
Great.
thank you everyone. Okay, so that we'll call it a night. Folks who want to join us for beers, we're going to meet at the Virginia Inn on the corner of 1st and Virginia. Otherwise,